Well, hello everyone. I am Billy Dees. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad that you found us. No matter where you found us, let me tell you that generally speaking, you can find the Billy Dees Podcast pretty much anywhere podcasts are found. And I say this because we're getting picked up by more and more platforms, and people are just happening across us. So if that's the case, welcome. And normally you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, TuneIn, on down the line. No matter where you found us, glad you are here. We're going to talk about podcasting today, and you don't have to be a digital media geek or nerd to enjoy the podcast, because we're going to speak in very general terms about where the industry is going and how we're kind of changing, going with the flow here on the Billy Dees Podcast. Now, no guest today. We've had a couple of very interesting interviews, and I want to tell you about those very briefly here in just a moment. In the meantime, I do want to shout out to just a couple of things. First of all the people that take part in the Podern family on Twitter. And if you don't know what that is, it's a hashtag Podern family. And that's where a lot of podcasters and a lot of podcast fans kind of share different genres, different podcasts, different episodes, and it's just a great place to hang out. If you're on Twitter and you're a fan of podcasts, do check out the Podern family. Also want to shout out to the fine people at HO Press, Shorehouse Books, and of course that's humoroutcast.com, the place to take a humor break. Do check them out, humoroutcast.com. I enjoy sometimes these episodes where I just get a chance to talk to the audience. A lot of times they're a little bit more relaxed, and I can share some insights. And if you have any questions or comments, now you can tweet me anytime you like. I'm real easy to find on Twitter at Billy Dees. You just have to be nice. You don't have to agree. Just be nice. A couple of our past episodes, an interview with Tony Dupree. And here again, on any of the platforms that I mentioned, you can check out any of our past episodes. She is an etiquette, style, and manners guru. And I got to tell you, in today's divided society and all the hostility that's out there, she has a great attitude about how to deal with people. I would strongly recommend checking out that episode. And prior to that, comedian Christine Hall, also in our playlist. She is a comedian, and she's on Twitter. We actually end up talking about Twitter quite a bit on that episode, so do check those out. And those both of those episodes still getting plenty of listens, and I'm very, very happy about that. As I mentioned, Spotify. Some interesting things happening with Spotify, and we are on Spotify, as I mentioned. I would have to say that as a whole, most of our listens come from Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and I notice the Spotify listens growing. And that's an indication to me that Spotify as a podcasting platform is on the rise, and it's because they've invested a lot. Recently, as of the time that we're in production with today's episode, Spotify has roughly 300 million active users. And one of the things that was highly publicized in the last few months was the Joe Rogan deal. Now, if you're a podcast fan, you probably know who Joe Rogan is. He has his podcast called The Joe Rogan Experience. All right. Well, that's cool. I should probably call the Billy Dees podcast the Billy Dees Experience. Now, that would give him a run for his money, right? But anyway, multi-million-dollar deal with Joe Rogan. Now, that's significant because it's telling me, and it's probably telling everyone, that podcasting has arrived. The days of it being just a little niche market for small creators, those days are kind of passing, and that's a good thing and it's a bad thing. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. And the other thing that Spotify is doing is they are bringing in video to podcasting, and not that it hasn't been before, But Joe was on another platform, let's say, for video, and now Spotify is picking that up. His deal with Spotify is Spotify exclusive. Okay. Recently, Michelle Obama also, she didn't get too creative with her podcast either, and I'm one to talk. Her podcast is called the Michelle Obama Podcast. Like I said, mine is the Billy Dees Podcast. So creatively, we're kind of, all right, well, there it is. This is all part of this Joe Rogan and Michelle Obama, part of other requisitions that Spotify has done. They picked up the Ringer Network, which is Bill Simmons' outfit, and that's primarily sports and entertainment. And that was already a pretty viable venture, and Spotify has picked that up. And also Kim Kardashian West. I'm not exactly sure what her podcast is called, but suffice it to say, it wouldn't be hard to find, right? Now, here's kind of where I want to start with this. Podcasting, the legend has it that podcasting, the term, has come from the iPod and broadcasting. Okay, it was kind of combined. And the legend has it that this was coined by the Guardian and BBC journalist by the name of Ben Hammersley. And this goes way back to 2004. Now, that was before I was involved with podcasting in terms of how it's called now or how it's referred to. But podcasting has been around a long time. And I would have to say here again, it was kind of a niche thing until about 2012. And there was a couple of things that really set podcasting off in 2012. One of which was presidents were giving interviews to podcasts, and the true crime genre was really starting to come along. There were some stories about some investigations and people's personal stories that really took root. And from 2012 on, the medium has pretty much done nothing but grow. And that's kind of interesting. My connection with podcasting is I have always been a long-time audio person. And that's where I'm going to start with what's happening with podcasting now. For me, audio is an art form. The way you interact with a professional microphone. It's, we are basically vocal creatures. Okay? And if you can express yourself, if you can tell a story, if you can masterfully give your opinion in a way that's very passionate, audio, your voice goes from your mouth to the microphone, travels an inch or two, and it goes right into someone's ear. That's a very type of what I would call communication intimacy. And with video, the microphone's a little farther away, the camera's a little farther away, and the sound has to travel. But with radio and with podcasting, the way that I kind of started with it, that powerful voice. And I don't necessarily mean you have to have a great voice, but you have to have a way of expressing yourself that can't rely on expressions, can't rely on hand gestures. It can't rely on video and pie charts and graphics and a gleaming smile. It can't rely on any of those things. It has to rely on the spoken word. And to me, that is an art form. And celebrities now are coming into that art form, and it's changing because not everybody that's coming into it right now approaches it that way. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But a lot of these celebrities, for example, are basically repurposing the audio from their television shows. They might have a commentary show on television, and they're simply repurposing that audio and putting it into a podcast. Now, repurposing something like that, I mean, it's a good idea. It certainly can reach a lot of people who may be too busy to watch your television show, and they can listen to it while they're on their way to work or what have you. But is that really the way I talked about it earlier? Is that really exploring the art form of voice? It may or may not be, but that's kind of what's happening. And with the infiltration of celebrities, which is great, you have a big audience now, okay? Because celebrities bring in people who may not have considered podcasts before. So with a bigger audience comes what? More creators. So you have a lot of people now, I've noticed, that are coming over from different mediums, from the blogosphere and from the vlogosphere and all these other places, and they're repurposing their content into the podcast form. I like a big marketplace. I don't want to be a part of a medium that's dying. But by the same token, there's all these different styles of podcasting now. And what was a podcast 5 years ago may or may not be considered in exactly the same way now. So, this is all a good thing. Like I said, celebrities coming in and people repurposing their content, it adds to a big marketplace, and I'm happy about that. Even with my own show, I have noticed that we're doing a little bit more video now. We have the Billy Dees Podcast on YouTube, and please check it out, subscribe. I'm new to that, so I don't have a big audience on YouTube. But I have noticed that there's no getting around the fact that YouTube is the second biggest search engine for information. So if I'm doing a podcast about XYZ and people are searching for information about XYZ on YouTube, then I want them to find the content that I have created, even though it's in the form of a podcast. Now, a lot of times podcasters will simply put the audio of their podcast with maybe a simple graphic or something like that on YouTube, and that's fine. I have been trying as much as possible to include some video, either of me talking on the microphone and maybe a picture of the guest. Recently with Tony Dupree, we used Zoom, okay? And that worked well, although I'm not a big fan of Zoom and Skype and those things. They're designed for end users. They're not really designed as production tools. So I'm exploring that. I'm actually signed up with a beta program with another company to do not only high fidelity sound, but also high definition video for remote interviews. So that's something I'm working on. And what's happening, though, with audio content? That would be my concern. With some of my episodes, I've noticed that I've started to lean towards video production away from the audio. And I don't want that to happen too much. It's, in my opinion, what I want to do is I want to create a podcasting platform with video that will accent the audio program. Now, naturally, there's going to be some episodes that just by their very nature are going to be better suited for video. Okay, but that doesn't mean that I want it to get to the point where there's visual things going on that if you listen to the audio program, you're going to miss. My kind of gauge is, the video is great. And even for something that's very visual, somebody's doing something that's very visual, I still want the rule of thumb to be, if it was audio only, and if the only people who were listening to it were listening on audio only platforms, would still be getting the value out of the podcast. That's kind of my rule of thumb is, if we're going to do a video oriented episode, it has to stand alone without any sacrifices as an audio program. That's kind of where I'm going. I believe that behind the scenes is another great option. Okay. It's a lot of times people just wonder what you look like or what a guest looks like. And that's fine. That's the purpose. That's the perfect reason to supplement what you're doing as a podcast with video. But at what point, and you can tweet me on this if you like, at Billy Dees on Twitter. At what point does what we consider to be audio content, when is it no longer audio content? When is it not a podcast so much anymore as it's just the audio that's been stripped off of a video? And see, for me, there has to be that audio element. There has to be that high fidelity sound. There has to be, I really strive to, when I have a guest or myself, I really work hard with the engineering so that the voice sounds like it's coming right out of the speaker, not like it's in the back somewhere, coming, down the hall and around the corner and then out the speaker. I really like that voice to just pop right out. And that's kind of my radio background, my audiophile background. That's kind of where I am. So what I would tell podcast fans, and what I would say to podcast creators is don't lose that focus. Don't lose that emphasis on your ability to speak. And don't lose sight of the fact that a lot of podcast listeners, they may be accessing video, but they are still on the treadmill. They are still doing whatever, doing the dishes, and they're listening to audio. And this also folds into the prominence of voice. That would be something that I would be very cautious not to lose sight of. It's great that video is rising, that it's becoming a tool to use with podcasting, but voice is big. And here's what I mean about voice. With all that's going on with interactive audio now, the days of having to search something by typing it in, those days are gone, okay? You can ask, what's this or what's that? And a speaker will come to life and give you the answers that you are searching for. You can even buy products that way. So there's interactive audio now in people's homes. There's streaming devices in people's homes that sound actually fantastic. And that's all the more reason that we should make podcasts sound as good as possible. They should sound better than television programs. They should sound, I really strive to make my podcast sound like radio-worthy programs. I mean, I kind of hearken to the old days when, there was those voices that came across and told you about your favorite songs and told you about the news and told stories. And that's what podcasting has done. It's given new life to voice. And especially now in this interactive age where there's so many streaming devices in the car and in the home, I'm really passionate about this. Don't lose focus on audio. Don't lose focus on how good your podcast should sound. And things you're doing with transcriptions and blogging and the video and all that should accent the podcast itself. At least that's what we're doing here. That's what we're doing here at the Billy Dees Podcast, is all these other things should be accenting really great audio content. And I really hope that I am doing that for you. I really hope that I am keeping audio and the spoken word as an art form. That's really what I hope I'm doing. Tweet me if you like at Billy Dees on Twitter. You can also find the Billy Dees Podcast on Facebook. We have a Facebook page now, and admittingly, for whatever reason, I haven't done a whole lot with Facebook, but that's starting to change now. We have a fully filled out Facebook page, and it's a work in progress. Do check it out. And as I mentioned, a very young YouTube channel, the Billy Dees Podcast, is on YouTube. We have a lot of our podcast on there, obviously, but we also have some support content, some other videos, and some other things, some behind-the-scenes stuff, as I mentioned. So all that stuff is there. Do check us out. I'm Billy Dees, and kind of a short and sweet podcast episode this week, but that's okay. I really enjoy talking directly to my audience because that's really what it's all about. And we have been growing here. The listens are going up. And I'm just thrilled, and I am so grateful for our audience, and that's why the Billy Dees Podcast is free, and I've tried to keep commercials and interruptions and all of those other things out of the way for the audience, because the content and you is what really matters. I'm Billy Dees, and until next week, have a great week. Well, hello everyone. I am Billy Dees from the self-titled Billy Dees Podcast. You can find me on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and many more of the best podcast networks. Join me for my commentary and interviews. Follow me on Twitter, real easy to find, at Billy Dees. I am Billy Dees. I'd love to have you listen in.